Welcome to this webinar. And my name is Gil, and I'm not sure how long this will take, something like an hour or less. This is a webinar about API exploration with Postman, and it's going to be a Star Trek themed one because I like Star Trek. And the reason I wanted to do this is like I'm teaching courses about automation, and like I mentioned before, I'm not sure if you've been here when I talked about my sob story from yesterday. Well, I am teaching people to work on Postman, and Postman was offline for an hour as part of the course, and I hope it doesn't happen today. But there's a lot of interest, obviously, in the microservice world, in the REST APIs world, how to do testing, and I do that as well. But one thing that we kind of don't touch a lot, and I do that as part of my courses, is exploration testing, exploratory testing, and how it relates to APIs. So I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to show you an actual session that I did. Hi, Bosnia. The session I did with Spock, searching for Spock, and you can check. You can see, like, I'm going to go through the kind of thinking, but before that, I'm going to explain in a bit what is exploratory testing and how it relates to APIs, how to do that, and what it means. Yeah, we can start, I think. So again, my name is Gil. I'm from Israel. I do courses and workshops on test automation and for developers and testers. Hi, Chennai, India. I'm doing, like I said, TDD unit testing, automation for developers and testers. I'm also the author of 2 books, Everyday Unit Testing and Everyday Spring Testing. You can check out on testingguild.com, which is like everydayunittesting.com, goes to the same place. I wrote it in the chat window. I'm going to copy that again for the people who just, well, I'm not. Well, you'll see that later. Also live sometimes on Twitter, and I do these webinars. So I do all kinds of webinars. You can check it on the site, everydayunittesting.com. Hi, California, USA. And there's the recordings of past webinars that I did. Like, I've been doing them for like 2 years, so a bunch of them there, and all kinds of, I took these kind of sessions and did them in other languages, English, but if you're not from the Java world, if you're doing Python or something like that, you'll find that examples in that as well. So you can check out the site and look for that. Like I said, what I do for a living is training and consultations on these kinds of topics. I work with developers and testers and help them produce better software at the end. So hi, Ukraine, stay safe. If you want to know more, go to the site and contact me, gil@testingguild.com, or Tal at testingguild.com, who is my business manager and currently a bit under the weather. But if you don't like these kind of bugs that kind of haunt you, call me. Won't tell you who did the thing at the end. So let's start. What does software need with testing? So obviously, we work with software all the time, right? As users, I'm using Zoom. I'm going to show you the thing I found in Postman. So obviously, a lot of complex code, a lot of workflow scenarios, we need testing. But what is testing? Well, I'm sure you know, but I try to like split it into different things that I thought, like, we have different aspects of testing. The first thing is what we have in the Gamma quadrant, is proving requirements. We have a spec. We say this, we have a spec of requirements, spec of UI, hi Turkey. With this thing, pressing this button should do that. So that's proving requirements, like a product manager or a PO told us in some way, this software should work like that. And where we're testing, we're checking that it actually does what it needs to do because we assume this is how it works. But as we know, not everything goes in the spec. I haven't seen in my life a full spec. So there are two things that we do when we're testing stuff. The first is checking expectations. So we have like expectation of an idea from the spec what it needs to do, but we kind of supplement in our mind what it needs to do as well. And we have expectations for that to work, and we check that our expectations from the software are reasonable. Like if you're testing something, if you're testing a software that sends an email, you have an expectation that the email will actually get to the recipient and the right recipient and immediately, and you want to check that it works. It may not be written in the spec because it will say that it sends an email, but we kind of interpret this thing in our head, in our team, in discussions, and we say, well, we have kind of expectations, and one of the expectations on email, for example, is that it will actually go out now, and it will be sent out now, and it will be received like 3 seconds later. And we don't have expectations that will take a day. But nobody writes that in a spec because obviously everybody knows what email is. And this leads us to something similar to confirming assumptions. So I know what an email is because I used that before in other types of software. So if I'm doing something similar to what I did before, I can compare it. Not only do I have expectations, I have an assumptions of how things should be working. And again, when I'm testing that, I'm kind of confirming my assumptions or the team's assumptions, whatever goes in my head. So these three things, the proving requirements, confirming assumption, and checking expectations, are kind in a known circle of data, of information. Either I know what I expected, I know what needs to be done, what needs to work, or somehow from my experience or somebody else's experience, kind of the circle of information, of knowledge, of what needs to happen, kind of check that as well. But once we step outside this circle, we're in basically exploration land. We don't know what's going to happen, but we want to learn. And this is basically what exploration is. And exploratory testing is basically the activity of testing in order to learn how the system behaves. If I do things like that, I may have some kind of expectations, but I'm willing to be surprised. This is basically where we're exploring behavior, and that's basically it. Guys, I didn't tell you, little admin. I'm not going to follow up anything in the chat. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I'll try to get them as I'm talking, but I'm not very good at multitasking. So I probably got to them in the end. But if you have something very now thing, please put it in the Q&A so it won't get lost in the chat. There's a very, very good book called Explore It. I really recommend it, by Elizabeth Hendrickson. She talks about what is exploratory testing at the beginning and gives a lot of techniques, heuristics of how to do this, like starting points if you're starting to explore, how you're going to do that. Which headphones am I using? I don't know. Kind of old ones. So I took a quote from there's a quote from this book like early on, and she talked about what is exploratory testing, and she says exploratory testing involves scouting around areas that the net doesn't cover. The net, she says, is the the net that we throw into the sea of testing when we're thinking about how we're going to test that. So we're doing some kind of planning on how to test. So involving the circle of knowledge that I talked about earlier, and we say we're going to expect to do this, this, and this, and look for this, this, and this. But everything else outside this is exploratory. And the way you do that is you interact with the implementation, the application, the APIs, and you design and execute very tiny experiments in rapid succession. And you'll see what kind of examples we can do with very small experiments. In rapid succession means we do it like one after the other, using the results from the last experiments to inform the next. And that means you'll see that in the demo that I'm coming up with ideas and say, well, I want to check that as well. And maybe it's a bit, I went too long to that path. Let's get back to the main path. And when you do that, you can learn a lot about the system you explore. And basically what you need is time to do that. But assuming that you plan okay, you leave time, because most of us don't have all the time in the world. And that means that we usually like getting pushed to test the spec, which is okay, but it's probably not enough. Remember that when we're testing, we're not really testing how things will actually look in production. We usually test on our machine or in some kind of settings like environment, a testing stage or whatever. And what we learn from that, we kind of like reflect on what will happen in production and basically get some kind of a decision whether it's okay to release that, it works okay, not okay, we should do something about it. So whatever we do in our very closed system of testing, it's not going to be the same as testing in production. And even if we do testing in production, which we can do, it's kind of limited of what we can do. So we're always going to be like a lag behind of what we're seeing and how it actually will reflect in the system itself. I see that there are some people with audio issues. I really apologize for that. I hope it will get better soon, and I hope it will be better in the recording that's going to be there. But we'll try. Now, how can you explore? It's going to take like a bunch of time. Like I said, if you actually do some kind of planning, you'll say, well, I'm going to leave some time for that exploration, but we can explore about like 1,000,000 years and still find something in Notepad. So how do we do that? So the idea of a session-based, which came from James Back and John Back, is the idea is that we can do like a procedure of testing, like step by step, when we know we're done, when we come to the end of the procedure. But exploration is not like that, because we don't have like a step-by-step thing. We kind of exploring and just doing all kinds of things. And the way to limit that is put a limited time around us. And so in this session, we're going to do something about one topic. So these are session-based, and in order to like concentrate on something, we need a charter. A charter is basically a mission statement of what we're going to do in this kind of session. A session could be like 10 minutes, it could be like 2 hours. It should be limited, because the way our mind works is that we can concentrate up to a point. And remember, everything about exploration requires a human. You can't automate exploration, because if you automate stuff, you've done all the learning already. So you can use all different kinds of automation to operate stuff, but you can't really assert automatically. Because if you've written an assert command, that means that you know what to look for and what to expect. So it requires humans. Humans get tired. Humans get bored. So usually this session should be like minutes to hours tops. And what I'm going to show you is like, first thing I'm going to show you like is what an example of a session like that. But the second thing I'm going to show is an actual session that I did. the first thing, obviously, I'm going to focus not about any exploration like pushing buttons in the UI or a mobile application or something like that. I am going to focus about APIs. And APIs are interesting because usually they don't live by themselves. Usually come in workflows, like in a bunch. And there's some kind of relationship between the order we call them or not. They're basically, APIs are like bigger unit tests. They check components of the software, but the real thing that we are really interested in are the features, the workflows. How do they work together? Because at the end, they're supposed to work for a benefit of someone. Again, a human at the end. So it's usually not an API working, but how you call it and how you call other APIs together with it, so we can actually get something valuable out of it. So we need to remember that API testing is not something that's, it's very easy to answer when you ask, have you finished testing this API? No, first, I'm not going to finish ever testing this API. But usually that's not the important thing, because I probably need to test it with other things as well. It usually is not complete for something valuable. Although I'm going to show you something, well, not valuable, but meaningful. I want to remind you that there's a whole course and workshop I do called API automation with Postman, 2 days, 2 whole days of exercises and stuff like that. Hopefully when Postman doesn't go down. So if you're interested, give me a call somewhere here or after that. Well, I hear the Postman has arrived, so let's get him in. So what I'm going to do in the first demo is I'm going to start not with Postman. I'm going to start with the browser. Where's my browser? Here's my browser, and this is, you may have heard about Google. It's something new. It's going to be very successful, I think. So the Chrome has something called the Chrome DevTools. You probably know about that. So you can actually record in the network tab. I'm going to move myself a bit. If you're looking at the network tab, you can see API calls getting there. So I'm going to look for testing. Okay, not iPhone. That's another thing. Let's start the demo again. Going to, and you see that the thing here, I'm getting the, it's called the search API. I'll filter that. And these are the APIs. I was testing, you know that it's getting called because as I'm doing this, as I'm typing, it gets called. And you know that, and you can see that like this query is with T and then TE and TES. And you see that API gets called differently with this value, obviously. So one of the things we'd like to know before we go into testing the API is how it gets called in an application, because we might want to look at it and see maybe it gets it has a definition, but it gets called differently. And if you look at it, I'm going to pick it like this one, testing. You can see that we have the query here, which is google.com complete. I don't know what this is, the search API. And you see the queue here. These are the parameters that I'm testing. Queue is the query actually that I'm typing. And you have all kinds of other parameters that I'm not aware. Maybe they are documented, maybe not, and I might want to look at them. I'm going to do this. I'm going to complete the testing. And it loads, and you can see that I'm sending testing, which is okay. And I have a source HP. I don't know what it is, but I can do something else. I can search from toolbar here. Right, same thing. And you can see in this query, I have other parameters. So I have AQS, which is, I'm not sure what it is, but is the Chrome, it identifies as Chrome sent it, not the Google page. So I can learn about different ways to have the same search API, but with different parameters. Sometimes it may be a different parameter. Somebody said, complete the query, probably it will return the dictionary of proposed queries. It could be, I'm not sure. But just looking at how other clients send it, and I'm doing the same thing, like I'm looking for testing, I can see that these things can work in different ways. Now I can take this, my query, and I said I promised Postman, right? So I'm going to copy that and go to Postman. Postman, where are you? And I left here something for Google. And instead of what I prepared, I'm going to copy everything that is here. And let's see what happens when I use the AQS Chrome. Is it something that's going to happen to do something interesting? It's interesting because when Postman has its own browser, and sometimes it doesn't look, although what it got me was the HTML, sometimes it brings HTML that it can't process, which is interesting. It doesn't say something about the query, but they may say something about Postman. And again, different clients might have different way of interpreting things. I want to show you something again at the browser. Where is my search? You see, this is the search I did, and search that is subsequent to that. I put testing at the address bar, and then it got called again. And this time and I'm not sure why, don't know, but I see that there are subsequent calls that I wasn't expecting. And this is something that I could go in depth and look for. Why is it happening? How is it different than other calls? And find out something. You can look at this kind of thing, which is more similar to what I had before. I'm going to copy that again. Copy and put it in Postman. This time I get something else interesting. Plus, there are things that I don't really understand. What are all these things that are starting from, I don't know, the PSL? All kinds of encoded stuff that I don't understand. Is that supposed to do? Sometimes I'll see that in my APIs and say, well, are we sending something in clear text? Are we supposed to send it in clear text? And then if not, maybe ask why. If it isn't in clear text, maybe it is supposed to be like that. I don't know. But there's something that I can learn from just operating the API, from how it's used in a different context. So that's cool. Yeah, but pretty sure you didn't want to see that, but it is an idea to think about. Testing APIs is testing APIs in context. So maybe if you're given an API, you think about how other clients are using it as well, because you want to check if it fits your expectations, if it confirms the specs, and so on. So yeah, that was the voyage to Google Home, but we're not here to do this. So I raised a lot of questions as I was playing with that, right? So, and this is what exploration is. Remember, if we're doing all kinds of experiments and we want to follow up about what we're seeing, we have probably lots of questions. Even if we have all the documentation in the world, we'll still have questions. Is it supposed to do that? Is it not supposed to do that? Is that what I expected? Am I surprised? I didn't expect to see that. What's happening if I follow up with this kind of ID that I see? What will happen? What if? All kinds of things. So exploration is about asking questions, sometimes even getting answers. Not always. One of the questions you might want to ask is, am I still on charter? I define this as learning the search API inside the Google Home And like I started thinking about parameters and so on, did I walk the path that I intended to? Am I still learning stuff that is interesting? Or maybe I'm going to say, well, you know, this requires another whole session that I need to do. There's a question, can all types of APIs in get method can give a preview value? Is it necessary? The preview is what you're going to, the preview is for the response. So you can play with the parameters in Postman. I haven't given you the whole tour, but I'm going to do that in a minute. But you can play with the parameter. The preview is what happens when on a response. So you get a response from the API and you can do whatever. Postman tries to understand what is being sent, and as long as it's XML or JSON or plain text, it will just show you that. With HTML, it will try to preview that. If it has other plugins for visualization like SVG or something like that, or images, it will try to do it. It doesn't promise anything, but it is very useful. Only the last thing we saw is not something that I can understand if it's okay, not okay. You can play with that and see. So what we are going to do is search for Spock. This is the charter that I'm going to invoke. How am I going to do that, you ask? Well, it's good that you ask. Where's my browser? So there's a site called StartTrek API, stapi.com. And you see that basically you have a browser where you can actually look for stuff. It actually is an API layer on top of fandom databases, alpha and beta. We have a lot of Star Trek. If you're interested in Pokemon, there's a Pokemon API as well. I learned that too. I was searching for Spock. So basically what I did is search for Spock under the character, and I do submit. And basically this is what you see. And what it does is invoke an API. And I'm going to go to Postman. And what I'm going to show you right now is what I went through when I did my session about searching for Spock. And it's an example of a session-based testing. So, Postman, for the people who don't know, you basically decide what kind of API method you want, an HTTP method, get, post, put, whatever you want to do. You give it a URL. You can give it parameters, like I'm going to show you in a minute, on something very simple, like with Spock. Basically, the parameters that you see here are title and name. It gets translated to a table, the query params, and you can work from there. And you can usually play with them. There are two ways. You can do all kinds of things in Postman. But what's more important for me at this point is that when I do that, when I look at it at the site, and I open the DevTools, and I do, let's refresh that. So I can show you the submit. I do the Spock on character. So this is how you look for the character in database. What's been sent is the API. Let's do that again. Where's the script? Well, trust me, it is this API. I'm going to, it is this thing. So STAPI, API v1, REST, it doesn't matter, character, this is what I'm looking for, search. And the funny thing is that it sends two parameters. I put in Spock once, but it sends two parameters. So Spock as the title and as the name. And if I do that, if I send this, I get a JSON. This is very similar to what we see. If we look at the search here, these are, you see there are 5 records here. Let's look at the JSON again. So there's some kind of header of pagination, page number, page size. It doesn't have to translate exactly what I see, but this is what gets returned. And you see the total elements 5. This is the 5 records that we see on the screen. And if we look at the data, we'll see there's a character named Spock, another character named Spock. Actually, I try to think about 3, but yeah, Spock, Spock 2 from the movies, and there's Spock in the mirror universe, which we'll get to in a minute. There's Benjamin Spock, the child psychologist. I'm not sure how he got into this, but the API brings that, which is interesting. Like if I'm a tester, I'm looking for Spock on a StartTrek database. Why is it bringing me something like that? So it's interesting. 5 records. All of them has Spock in it. That's cool. But the first thing I said, well, I was looking for Spock. Why is it sent twice? So let's try something. And what you have in Postman, by the way, for everything, for every query like that, you can save the response. When I did this send, it got me the JSON, and I have a save response. I can save that. So everything you see here is basically a saved response. Why? Because of my trauma from yesterday where it got offline. But it doesn't really matter. But it's a way to document what I do. So my first thing was, okay, I'm looking for Spock. What happens if I swap these things? So I said, I'm going to search for a title named Spock, but the name is going to be Kirk. Will it bring me Spock? And you see that the records that coming in, not sure who Peter Kirk is, are about Kirk, James T. Kirk. That's cool. So obviously, when I'm looking for the name, the title doesn't do much of an effect. Let's try to actually prove that. So my next query was with Spock as the name and title as Kirk. I'm not sure how this will work. I'm doing send. Please, everyone who's writing questions about post and stuff like that, I'll try to answer them, but that's going to be in the end. Please, in order to do that, write them in the Q&A box so I get back to them. If it's mixed up in the chat window, I'm going to lose that. So please write them in the Q&A. So when I did this, Kirk and name equals Spock, it gives me the results of the first early entry when I was looking for Spock. So you see that the number of elements 5. These are Spock details. So what I get from that is title probably doesn't do anything for my query. So what I did was I searched for only the name to see what happens. And when that happened, I actually got the same results for Spock. So what I learned is that although the browser uses a title, I don't need to. So it's interesting in that fact. But then I said, okay, I want to look, what does title mean? Maybe it does mean something, but not for a name of a character. So I said, well, I'm going to look for a specific Spock, the one from the movie, The Voyage Home. So what I did was I said, the name is Spock and the title is Voyage. A partial thing, I'm expecting this to work. What happens? Well, same results as before. So obviously my title was not enough to bring the right Spock home. I said, okay, let's try to make the title a bigger, more detailed. So I wrote Voyage Home with name Spock. Will this work? Nope. Same things. So it's not that I'm getting mad here, but I'm learning that this title may not do at least partial thing. And something very interesting happened next. So I wanted to write The Voyage Home. But you see this, a %20 means space. And I mistyped. I didn't write the 20. I wrote only the percentage. So I wrote The Voyage Home, but not with a space. And I sent it. And look what I got. I got an internal server error. which is interesting because now I've learned that it's easy, simple, to break the server. Now I expect if title doesn't mean anything to get again the same set of results for Spock. But apparently a broken encoding of the title breaks stuff. I didn't expect that. So I learned that it is possible to break this API. And when I do that, I get like what status, and I know that it's written in Java, and invalid URL encoding. So I know exactly how to break it now. And maybe I can do something like that if I was a hacker. I'm not. So that was cool. This was a learning point about what can be done with this API. This is what Explorer testing is. So I fixed my thing, and then now I have the voyage home with the correct spaces. And I got the same results. Apparently, the title doesn't matter here. So I said, okay, enough about that. Probably I won't get nothing to learn from this title. Let's try something else. I saw that in the results, I have a lot of fields. And I said, let's try to get a specific Spock with a year of birth. So I wrote name Spock, year of birth 2269. It's one of the records that is part of the 5 things there. I expected at least to filter that. I expected. I was very disappointed. Still brings back all 5 Spocks. See the 2230, not the 2269. So yeah, so year of birth doesn't work. How about another field? So marital status, I didn't show you. It looks like this. It has a marital status. Okay, I want all the married Spocks. Give me all the married Spocks. I want a Spock 1. Can you give it to me? Nope, I still get 5s. At this point, I was a bit disappointed, but before stopping and doing something that I'll do in 2 more queries, I tried something else. Can I do something by name, like Spock 2? So Spock is okay. Can I do something with Spock 2? It has a space in it. It's like the %20. Didn't want to break anything, so I used plus. Can it find Spock 2? It appears in one of the 5 things. Yes, it gets me 1 element and Spock 2. That's cool. Excellent. Is it smart? Wanted to see if it's really smart. Can you find the Spock 2 without the space in it? And these are things that I'm thinking on the way. Okay, I'm not planning this ahead. So I wrote Spock 2 without the space. Let's see if it finds it. It doesn't. See, it's empty, and that means that name has to be exact. Now, that could be a good thing. That could be by design. It could be a bad thing. Like if I'm using something with spaces, I have to be with exact spaces, which I think with Klingon names becomes very complex to find the right thing. Okay, like I said, at this point, I said, okay, I checked like this thing with the names, and I did all the checks with the other parameters, but I didn't seem to affect my result. So I went to the documentation. It took a while, but I did that. And if you go to the documentation, this is what you see. This is a documentation that's created automatically with Swagger. You can download that. And you can see the different things that are here, the pagination, which are very important because this is how we like bring batches of these things. But I'm not interested in pages. I'm interested in bringing on the Spock. And you can look at the post and the parameters, and you see page number and page size, API key, I'm not sure what it is, name. And if you look down, you'll see that all the things that I tried are not documented. So is that good? Probably, I'm not sure. But my documentation is not the truth. Somebody wrote it, right? A developer. So I'm not trusting anything, but it says that it has support, at least for the mirror universe. And I saw that in my Postman, in the last query, let's go for one of the first, when it had the 5, there is indeed a mirror field. And I'm going to try my next query sending Spock with the mirror universe one. So you can see that it's a Boolean, it's a true or false. And Spock from the mirror universe, true. Yes, I got Spock, which actually has one record with the mirror universe. It has mirror true. But then I ask, it gets me the one thing. If I try with the false, will it bring me the other 4? So Spock not from the mirror universe. So I'm sending it false to see how it works. Yes, it brings me 4, and these 4, the other 4, which is cool because it means that my expectation worked. But then I remembered I broke the server with this thing. Let's try that again and see how it works. So this time, I searched for Spock. With mirror, I put false. Remember, this is a Boolean. It needs to either be true or false. But I'm sending strings, right? So what if I do FAL, a partial string? What happens then? Gives me 4. And if you look for it, these are the 4 with the mirror equals false. I said, does it actually anticipate that FAL means false? I don't know. So I tried with mirror and partial of true and see what happens. No, it gives me the other 4, the 4 with the false. So what I learned is that if I give at least mirror, but I can assume and confirm that later, that a partial value of one of the fields, it will divert to the default. In Boolean, the default is usually false. So I can learn from that as well. Not breaking it, but at least how it works. Finally, I did a couple of things that I wanted to see, like I'm sending Spock with a big S and the rest is lowercase. What happens if everything is lowercase? Does it still bring me the same set of results? Yes, it brings me the same 5. And I can also check with all capital letters, see if it works. Yes, brings me the same 5. Again, I have some kind of expectation that this will work. I'm not surprised that it works, but it confirms my expectation. The final thing I did is, I'll go to the documentation again, and I'm not sure if it says so here. I think it somewhere says that it only returns JSON. So I asked for there to get an XML. So with Postman, you can do that, and I'm going to show how the query looks like. So basically, this is the same API, same name. Only in the headers, I can play with the different header fields. And I can override the except. Usually the except for anything by default is Postman tells you, send me anything, I'll take care of that. Usually it's JSON, XML, stuff like that. It can render anything, but I wanted to be specific. So the default probably is sending JSON back. We saw that. But I said, well, this time, I'm going to search for Spock again, and I'm going to accept only application XML. Okay, please send me the result in XML. This tells the API, I can only understand XML. Please send something back. And I did that. And what happens is that, first of all, it doesn't send anything, which is kind of what the documentation says. A bit more, you can see that it sends a status called not acceptable, which means I can send something back that is what you asked from me, which is cool. But then I said this, let's save the response. This is a Postman thing. So I said save as an example, which you can send that. And look what happens. You don't see that. I'll do it live again just to show the demo. So currently it doesn't have any examples saved. I'm going to do that again. Save response. And remember, there is no response, right? This is not acceptable. This is empty. Let's see what happens. It creates an example. Not sure it created it. Let's try that. Save as example. And before I did that, and that again in the demo, it gave me the wrong name, which is a bug in Postman, which I can't really reproduce right now, which is okay because these demos look like that. So this is where I said, okay, I'm finished. We're out of time anyway. So this would be like a good example of what I did. I had a charter. I decided what I'm going to do. I said that I'm going to actually look at an API, and I played with it. And I played with the parameters and maybe a bit with the headers to see how it works. A cool thing that Postman does is that it helps me document, because everything I showed you actually happened in this order. So every time I changed something, I duplicated the thing and gave it another name. And I was able to save the result for this thing so I can reproduce stuff. So it gives you, Postman gives you a way to test stuff. The guidelines is in my head. Like, this is going to be about, the charter says I'm going to look at the search for Spock API. This is what I'm going to do. But I play with it, and it recorded what I did with my help, and it's documented, and it got the results so I can reproduce stuff, hopefully. And this is what I want from a testing session, right? I want not to have a lot of notes there. Everything I need is hopefully in my head, plus what Postman recorded. So this is very efficient way, very effective way to actually do a session like that for APIs. Now, I did just one API. You can do that with multiple APIs and requests. And Postman allows you to put collections of that, so you can actually record workflows. It's not a matter of automating stuff, although it could be, but it's a bit about exploration. What you learn as what you're doing. So let's get back to the team here who are searching for Spock. Fortunately, we didn't find him, but that's okay. What did we learn? First of all, we talked about exploration and what it means. And I showed you in the demo. I was trying to learn what the API behaves like when I send it different stuff. I didn't know much about it. I had some documentation, a boring documentation. If I didn't understand the bits of English, I would not learn anything, because it just told me what the parameters are. If I didn't know about the mirror universe, I wouldn't know what mirror means. So there is some kind of luggage that I'm bringing with me, and I kind of piece together the puzzle from the documentation, what I know about the application and what I expect. There was a lot of expectations here because I just played with the APIs and parameters. I know there's a Spock. I know there's one in the voyage home, and I was looking for that, and I didn't find him. Sorry. Found Kirk. I also showed you Postman is a lot bigger than what I showed you, but it's very easy to work with Postman to send these kind of requests and see what happens. And if you kind of focus on your sessions about the specific APIs and what you want to see and what you want to learn, and stop, because you actually need to stop somewhere, you can say, well, you know, this API, pretty useful. I understand how it works. I saw one thing that could be a bug, the encoding stuff, and I can tell the stakeholders, well, this is what I found. Some of these things I may find interesting to go back and look more deep. Like the encoding stuff is very interesting. Like I will try other APIs to see if it works in that way again. I will try different values of encoding with the space, with other special characters, not just English characters, to see what happens. Maybe try something with Klingon and see how these things work, and at least try if they fit my understanding of how this API should work. I could, from this, like take a step back and think, well, this is a cool API. How is it used in a feature? In a feature, it will bring information, maybe show stuff on the screen about Spock. And if the API doesn't work as I expected, how will it work when I have UI for that? So gives you something to think about in the context of the big application and how it gets used. And that's basically what I wanted to show you today. So you have Postman. Postman basically is free out of the gate. You have to register. It is always online. I said before we began that I didn't like one thing about Postman. Now I don't like two. So the second one is from yesterday when it went offline. If you are relying on Postman for your automation in your exploration, and it gets offline, which happened to me the first time yesterday, it can be like a very traumatic event. But other than that, the one thing I don't like about Postman, because the other things it does very well, is that it separates the tests from the code. And everything in the tests is in the cloud on the Postman servers. And that means that you can't really version the test code or the tests from the code itself together. That's a very big problem. It tries to give you the whole continuous integration cycle. I can talk about that as well, with metrics and stuff like that. But as long as you can't connect it with the code, you can't really reproduce stuff exactly as possible if the tests were on your machine or your session. There are other tools as well, but Postman is really a very good tool for what it does. So if you haven't tried it, try it. If you haven't tried exploring APIs, go try that as well. If you don't, go climb a rock, as Jim says. And basically that's everything. What I want to remind you is like this. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I will try to answer things that I haven't answered while I was working. This session is being recorded and hopefully will be up somewhere in the next days or weeks on the site. If you have interest in doing some kind of workshop on Postman, but other things as well, visit the site, let me know. I do these kind of workshops, and what you've seen here is a glimpse of what I do. And we could do a lot of not just Star Trek, but a lot of exploration as well as part of this workshop. So if you're interested, let me know. I can help you with that. Spraying automation, API testing, unit testing, clean code, whatever I said. Q&A. I'll leave this here. Let's talk about questions. If you don't have questions, that's cool. If you leave too, that's okay. It was nice having you here today. We'll be back next month with another thing. Which headphones are you using in this webinar? I have no idea. It's very old and everything rubbed out. They are connected to the computers, so I try not to. I usually don't have problems with that. I hope the recording was okay. Facing internet issues, can do that. Hopefully you're no longer. If I had any dinner, not yet. Plan to. Can we call two API endpoints at the same time in parallel using Postman? The mode that I'm using is a manual mode, and which means like I'm using the UI and I'm setting everything and pressing a button to call it. You can do repeated calls, but not at the same time. The same goes also for the automated mode. There's something called Newman, which is the command line interface to running a collection of requests. So if you want to do that at the same time, it doesn't support that, as far as I know. you might want to do something different, but there might be plugins that you can actually use for Postman. Not aware of that, sorry. I can check it out. I will check it out. API Portman, I'm not sure what it does. Not a question. Would you point a good glossary checklist on what should be expected in journal form from the tested API from the QA perspective? Okay. A very big question. We start off by basically having some kind of documentation. The person who's written documentation usually is the developer or maybe the product people, and they tell you this API should work like that. It should answer, give you a status of 200 if everything is okay. It should give you a 404 if it wasn't found. Well, you're not surprised, but it returns this kind of schema of JSON. When it works, it will give you an error message if it doesn't. All kinds of things of the behavior that's put in the code. So there's no really checklist. If you there's, it really ups to the developer, because there's a problem with REST APIs, the REST architecture, is that it's not a standard. Although there are different languages and technologies that can actually do that, most of them do the same thing because they're doing HTTP and XML and JSON, which are standard. And so, but REST itself is not. So the implementation really dictates how it behaves. For example, it is customary that if you add a record, you'll get a 201, a status of 201, which is created. But there's no standard that says that if you did a post to create something, you actually need to get a 201. It's like an expectation, but nobody says or mandates that. So you start out with the statuses. What do you expect to see? And you can work out with the developers if what you see is what you really expect to see. The rest is starting to look like, how is this API specifically, when it's working, how it relates to the feature. Because like I said, mostly features are not calling one API. They're calling them in sequence. And when they call them in sequence, like they get called the first API to get something in the response, and you get something from that response and use that in the second API. So when you get this kind of context, how things are related, how these are sequenced, how they are dependent on each other, you can say, so I'm going to focus on this kind of API. I know these kind of fields I'll get from something else, but nobody restricts me to putting whatever I want, because a computer can call it however it wants to call it. That the client, the web client, calls it this way doesn't mean that another computer can't do it. I check that. So there's no checklist, but start out with the statuses, the schema of what is being sent and what is going to be received. Again, this usually comes from the developers of the product side, or the documentation if you have somebody to ask. And then try to understand from the feature perspective how it's getting used, what are the dependency between these things, so you can actually check it conforming to how it's going to be used in the application. I hope that helps. Okay, how to use DevTools on website if they use proxy to mask up their APIs. So it's a very good question, which may not be related to calling the APIs. When you're doing some kind of tests, you're working usually around something that is open to you and documented to you. And unlike what I did, go into somebody else's APIs and try to look what these things means. And we saw that in the Google API. I didn't go into the documentation and found out what these parameters actually means. And some of them we see that they were encoded with something that I really couldn't see. And I was not sure if Google's sending private information about me to its servers. So we don't know. Usually when you're doing testing, it's about your kind of application, and some of that at least is open to you, documented to you. and you could at least know what you're sending. If you're using things that are obfuscated or proxied or going through a VPN, stuff like that, you can know only in the in between the what you can see. But you should start by doing that. I'm going to answer a couple more questions, and I'm going to finish. And I try to answer questions. I'm not an API. Questions in my blog and my posts. So 2 more questions. Is there a way to import one file of multiple curl requests? There is an integration with curl. You can import stuff from curl. I'm not sure if there's a bulk one. I'll need to check that out. I know there's a way to import a curl and translate it. Curl is the command line version. Windows, Linux has it as well, to just send it from the command line a request. I'm not sure if there's a bulk way to do that. Maybe there is. Can't answer right now. I will check it out. We're doing exploration of API in real industry work. Most of us don't. Most of us don't have time to do this, but you saw that I was like looking at one API and found something that could be very disturbing. So it really is important to do that. If you think about it, most of what we test is this big, but if you look at the code that's being written for that, it's this big. We run a lot of things that can go wrong and integrate with each other and complicate it, and all kinds of scenarios that the developers that were concentrated on this didn't take into account. So exploration basically is a must, but in order to do that, you need to plan for it. You need to put spare time for that and do that. And if you don't do that, you're just taking the risk. It's like gambling. I'm going to test whatever I can in this time, but basically I will learn only this thing about the world. Well, the world is this big. So for people, teams, organizations that have understood that, they put time into that. If people who work with sprints, they actually put time for exploration in this sprint. And that means that if it takes time to do that and it's important, then maybe the developers will write less code and will explore that and learn about what they did and say, okay, this works for us. So at this point, I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thank you for coming. I will try to get all the answers answered somehow, maybe subsequent webinars. And other than that, good evening, good day, good whatever you have, good dinner. And I hope to see you soon in another webinar. Come to the site. Let me know if you're interested in me helping you. And other than that, have a nice rest of the day, or REST API of the day. Thank you very much. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for the support, and remember, live long and test.